Hello, family members. Hope you're having a good day today. I'm going to tell you a story. So, I remember thinking as I was going through the run up to the election that there's just no way that this country is going to want to elect this man for another term as president. Not after everything he's done. Not after all the lies that he's told that it's cost lives, hundreds of thousands of lives. Not after his healthcare plans, which are so insufficient and just ill-formed that it's going to cause so much problem for America's sick and just our well-being as a country. I remember thinking that we had such a good candidate, somebody with Senate experience, with decades of work as a public servant, who would be very competent. I had every faith that it would be a very successful presidency. And so when I woke up and found out that we had reelected George Bush in 2004, it broke my heart. Well, history is kind of changed the way it looks at George Bush these days, primarily because we've seen much worse, but also because we know very unquestionably that he did lie, and that he got us into the Iraq War using lies, that there's multiple points of very clear evidence where they had intelligence that said one thing and they said we're saying something else publicly to lie us into this war that it ultimately caused ISIS to exist. So thanks for that. But when you compare him to Donald Trump, the amount of chaos is significantly higher with this man than with Bush. But the reason I wanted to tell that story is I wanted to, basically point out that we've been through this before. And it's not exactly the same, obviously. The stakes are very high. But, when we think of the people that are on the Supreme Court that are corrupt, one of them is Alito. And guess who appointed him? That was Bush. And John Roberts, too, for that matter. And he is not really showing much respect for the Constitution in the way that he's running this court, let me say. But it was really hard for me. Really, really hard for me. And I mean, literally, I don't think I voted again for like maybe over 10 years or something ridiculous. Like, it was that disenchanting for me. And there was a song by NoFX that came out after that had a line about, well, there's no reason being upset about losing a race that was already fixed. And I don't believe this race was fixed in a literal sense. Well, let's get into that, because there's a lot of nuance here, and that's what I need to talk about. The place that we are today is the result of decades of slow slide into authoritarianism and toleration of corruption. When you look back at the last few decades of American politics, you can see that at some point there was this idea that the parties were sort of equally bad, and that was kind of true. They both sort of played the same kind of games, and you know, but there were a lot of unwritten norms that held for centuries, for 2 centuries. And they've slowly been broken down over the course of basically my lifetime. I think it started with Reagan, and it has slowly gotten to the point where they took the Overton window over, and at the same time, they normalized more and more corruption, more and more voter suppression, voter subversion, more and more trying to craft an electorate that you can manipulate to maintain power permanently, That's the goal. Like, I think that the Republican Party thinks that it would be great if they could win every election, every time, always. And that's not democratic. That's not, that is not American. It's so anti-patriotic. But part of how they have gotten away with what they've done in this slow corrosion of our country's norms and what is acceptable, and as far as trying to get away with doing things. While people love to praise, say, Brad Raffensperger from Georgia for holding against Trump last election cycle, you know what he did in the run-up to this election cycle? He did a whole lot of lawsuits to try to make it harder for people to vote and disenfranchise people. Like, this is not just one person. This is not just one campaign. This is a concerted effort by Republicans to have things their way. It's no longer about convincing voters that your way is the best way. It's about getting your way. And whatever you have to do to get there is worth it. And for that reason, this morning, you know who I woke up and I was the most angry at? Mitch McConnell. Like, Mitch McConnell went along with a lot of terrible stuff in order to maintain his position of power until basically he realized he had no power left and decided to bow out, I guess. But, if he had had the political will to go out there and get that vote on that second impeachment, we might not be where we are today. So I would say in a lot of ways, he's the most direct person responsible for what we're going through. But he is taking advantage of loopholes and systems and just driving a runaway train, following the inertia of actions that were taken by craven men that came before him, Newt Gingrich, your Paul Ryans, what's his face, the weed guy. Oh, I can see his face in my name and in my brain, and I can't remember him. Very red gentleman. But like, all of these Republican Party leaders that could have tried to steer the party away from corruption and from taking advantage of every little situation, like McConnell did with his Supreme Court shenanigans, Like, there is a very large apparatus that has been working for all of my lifetime, probably 40 or 50 years, to get us to where we are today. And I think going through that heartbreak in 2004, and then again in 2016, has inoculated me in some sense, because I know what it feels like to feel like your country has broken your heart. How could they do this? How could they go out and vote for that man? But as my mom pointed out this morning, it's not like the people that voted for Trump don't care. They care a lot. They think they saved us from something here. Like, they see themselves as the heroes in their story. And it's so sad. It's so sad that our fellow countrymen have been led astray, have been lied to, manipulated like this. It is so important right now for us to not let this tear us apart as communities. We need to be taking care of our neighbors. We need to be taking care of our coworkers, our friends, people who are in the same, groups as we are, minorities of every sort, disabled people, queer people, people of color. It's really important right now that we support each other through this grieving for what could have been, and then get ready for what we're going to have to do next. Because this is going to cause more people to be in deadly situations. It's going to cause more poverty. It's going to cause things we can't even comprehend right now. And some things we can, which is why we're grieving today. But the next thing we have to do, once we've processed our grief, is we have to realize who the real enemies are and how you oppose them. The other night, Mom and Dad and I were sitting around watching YouTube, and a thing came up, and it was Sinead O'Connor with Roger Waters doing the song Mother. Beautiful. And I think about her. I think about how she had the strength to go out in front of the world on live TV and tell us the truth, that the institutions that are supposed to protect us have too many layers of bureaucracy and are too afraid to address problems when they happen. That would love to see problems just go away and would rather pretend they don't exist than actually take care of them. And that's what the Catholic Church was doing, and maybe is still doing. I'm not as well versed on that as I probably ought to be. But, the Catholic Church had systemically been covering up a lot of horrible, horrible crimes, primarily towards children, which is just so sad. And rather than address the problem, they kept trying to push it under the rug, transfer the priest, pretend it isn't happening, look the other way, don't open the well to them, like, and that's kind of where we are right now with this country, is the people with the capital, the people who have the real power, have gotten things right where they want it so that they can have an autocracy that's going to support them, they believe. Pro-business autocracy, that got them things like corporations are people, and silly rulings like that, where money is speech. Now we have these super PACs and all this horrible, the advertising has just gotten out of control. And we really, as a community, those of us that would like to see our country actually serve us and not just the people on the top with the money, what we need to focus on is we need to focus on reforming the election system. We need to fight for ranked choice voting. We need to fight to end the Electoral College. We need to fight to end the super PAC nonsense. We need to fight to make sure that the outsized influence of money in elections is tempered in every way we possibly can. Because they have a media machine that is so vast and all-encompassing. We're talking about YouTubers, podcasters, authors, comedians, animated shows, movies, all of these things that the right-wing moneyed interests are pouring tons and tons of capital into. That you got to look at where they're spending their money, where they think is going to get some sort of payoff for them. And things like, say, the Daily Wire, or, there's all these Twitch streamers that are really super right-wing. All of that, along with Fox News and all of the, worse than Fox News is, OAN, I think, is one of them. There's just so many of them. And the reason why it's easy for those to exist is because there are lots of billionaires with lots of money who want people to vote pro-business, and in their mind, pro-business means Republican. And so what are they willing to do? They're willing to fund things like the Daily Wire. They're willing to fund things like all sorts of stuff like that. That's J.D. Vance's career. There's these venture capitalists and Peter Thiel and all of these people who are flying under the radar. We're paying too much attention to the Elon Musks and not enough attention to Kochs and all of the people like that. The lady who Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem for because she gave him enough money. There are lots of rich conservative people who are funding these operations. That's why I think that Tim Pool and Dave Rubin and all of them took that Russian money and didn't question it, because they're used to getting money like that from rich conservative jerks. And guess what? Rich liberal jerks, what are you talking about? That's not a thing. We don't have the same thing. Probably the closest thing that we have to, say, a left version of Daily Wire would be, say, the Pod Save America, maybe. And they're not even really left, they're centrist. You know, the moneyed interests that aren't right-leaning in the United States are mostly centrist. They're not left. Because there's not too many people who have leftist morals and ideals that would calculate or would accumulate that level of wealth. It just wouldn't feel morally right to them. You know? And so we don't have, these rich leftist billionaires out there making a left-wing answer to Fox News or OAN or Blaze Media or whatever. You know, there's all of these. There's so many conservative media companies. And we cannot overlook the significance of that, what that says. You know, what the project is. It's to create that bubble, to lock people in and make them believe that the other side is everything that their politicians actually are. I mean, it's all projection, you know? It's so funny to me that they went with the Kamala is a slut narrative when Donald Trump is the biggest freaking man whore in the entire world. Jeffrey Epstein said so. We found that out recently. We have tapes of Jeffrey Epstein saying his bestie Donald Trump loved sleeping with his friends' wives and had no moral compass. We know he's a freaking sex fiend. But who did they brand with a slur against their use of their sexuality? Kamala. You know, every accusation is an admission with them. It just is. And what we have to do is we have to help our communities start reuniting, reconnecting. We need community organizers. We need to stop hoping that if we can get a Democrat in the White House, that we can get this back on track. The only way that we're stopping this slide into corruption is we're going to have to start thinking small. We're going to have to start creating strong community organization groups. We need to learn how to bring people in who haven't been politically active before, because I think they've got their base locked in. I think they've got enough people in their bubble that if we don't do something to fix this, we are going to just keep seeing the same thing over and over again. When the Republican is in the White House, they're going to do such an awful job and they're going to mess things up so much that there'll be a backlash. Enough people will come out and vote against them like they did with Biden. Remember, that was a record turnout. And then when people have a Democrat in the White House and feel like the country isn't getting better, and for a lot of us it's not. It's getting better maybe for the people at the top or in the upper middle, but people who don't have stocks would not agree that this is a good economy, okay? And so, of course, they're not going to turn up to vote for a person who represents that in their mind. You know, their struggle, their current struggle. but all of the Republican base is locked in and they'll go out and vote. And so they outvote the people who cared enough to go vote this cycle. And the only way that we get out of this is if we have people who are enthusiastic enough to come out every cycle. Then it's not going to be so easy for them to just depend on the people they already have. They will at some point have to go back to having to convince other people to vote for them instead of just depending on their base, which is what they've done for the last 25 years. And if we can grow our communities, if we can learn how to connect with people who are disengaged from politics and help them see that everything is politics, that you can't disengage from politics, because if you are disengaged from politics, you're just voting for the status quo to continue, And so what we need to do is we need to help building these local coalitions so that we can keep the engagement going every year, because every year there are elections everywhere. And little local elections can have just as much impact for the people who they affect as national elections do for the people they impact. It's just, a different number of people involved, but the actual ratio of impact can be very similar. And so that's where we have to focus. We have to focus and not just think about getting someone out when there's a crisis, trying to get everyone out to vote for president. Like that's going to fix this. We can't do that anymore. If, say, Mitch McConnell had barred Trump from running for president, Trump would not have won today. But I have a feeling that whoever was the Republican would have won. And do you think that's going to have been that much better? I don't think it is. Because the Republican Party and its base, they lead each other around by the nose. There are things that the Republican Party probably wouldn't care about or would like to do differently, but they know that their base would never go for it, so they have to go hard for what their base wants. And the base really, really has their priorities, and so they're willing to overlook things that are against their interest, that the party establishment wants to do. They both lead each other around by the nose. And that means that nobody's making principled decisions there. We need principled decisions. We need public servants. And the immediate need is going to be very strong. If you can work at your local food pantry, or at least donate to your local food pantry, please do. Fresh produce, like butter, oil, things like that they probably don't get a lot of, not just like canned food. Your local queer communities, show as much support as you can. Go out to drag shows. If there's pride marches, go. Community meetups. All of that's really important right now. Call the people that you know that are vulnerable. People like me who are disabled, or queer people, people of color, people in your lives that you know that this has been really tough for, and make sure they know that you support them, that you're there for them. That's going to be really important. Let's grieve and let this trauma bring us together and be trauma bonded and angry and energized so that we can take on what we've got to take on. Because the next 4 years are going to be rough, folks. And the only way that we're going to get through them is together. Well, family members, I better let you go. I could probably talk about this all day, as you might imagine, but know that every single person that watches this video is so important. You are so important. Even if you're here to troll me and leave nasty comments, you're an important person. You're a worthwhile person. And I hope that things go well for you, whatever that means, as long as it doesn't mean hurting someone else in the process, okay? Anyway, take care of yourselves and the people around you. Love you, family members. Bye.